Hello everyone. Here's me doing something I have never done before, so I hope it all works out. I'm going to read you the first chapter of Breaker, my novel about a disaster that threatens the Firth of Forth, and about two young people who decide they're going to make a difference to the world. When chapter 1 starts, Tom and Beth have moved to North Berwick. They're not happy. North Berwick is cold, it's wet, and their new house is a total disaster. So this is where the adventure begins. Chapter 1, Sunday in the Rain. Take Toby down to the beach. He can have a nice long run there, and when you get back, everything will be warm and cosy. That's a promise. The front door closed. Tom frowned as he tugged on the lead, pulling Toby out of the path of a passing car. If Mum was so desperate to get a dog, he grumbled, why isn't she the one who's taking him out for a walk? She can't, said Beth. Dad's gone to the dump with a pile of rubbish, and the plumber's coming to fix the central heating. Well, at least it's a break from lugging boxes up all those stairs, said Tom. After yesterday and this morning, my arms feel like cooked spaghetti. Tom lurched forward as Toby jerked on the lead, almost choking himself in his hurry to move on. Beth zipped up her jacket and cast a doubtful glance up at the sky, where a line of dark grey cloud was swiftly eradicating the small patch of blue. Toby didn't care about the fat drops of rain splashing onto the pavement. Stumpy tail wagging furiously, he scurried along the narrow street and dashed across the road towards the stone steps leading down to the beach. A stream of people passed them, heading for shelter. Umbrellas were popping up everywhere. Already, the wide expanse of sand was deserted, except for one solitary family, gathering children and packing up their belongings. Toby looked up, eager for Tom to unclip the lead. The children stood shivering in the cold wind blowing in off the sea. What about the centre? Tom gestured to the seabird centre, perched on the headland like a giant wooden sailboat washed up on the rocks. We could look at the Bass Rock on the webcam. Find out what the birds are up to. I don't need a webcam. I know what the birds are up to, said Beth. They're standing around in the rain, just like me. She squinted through the steadily increasing drizzle at the looming bulk of the rock thrusting up out of the water. Why is it so white? Work it out, said Tom. There's a lot of birds out there. Beth looked at him. You mean they live on a mountain of poo? Yup, Tom grinned. Yuck. Beth looked back at the water. A host of little sailing boats were heading for the harbour. Out beyond the rock, she could see a massive ship outlined against the darkening horizon. It didn't seem to be moving at all, though it was hard to tell at that distance. A zigzag flash of summer lightning split the sky, followed a moment later by the deep rumble of thunder. Beth turned away. The storm was building, but a ship that size probably didn't need to worry about the weather. Toby whined in disappointment as they left the beach and made their way up the path to the seabird centre. Tom stopped at the big glass doors and peered inside, wondering if he could trust Toby to behave. From the look of the crowd milling about inside, it seemed that most of the refugees from the beach had headed for the nearest available shelter. Tom pointed to a sign just above their heads declaring that assistance dogs were welcome. Does that mean ordinary dogs aren't allowed? Maybe we could pretend he's a guide dog, suggested Beth. Tom looked down at Toby. No chance. Toby looked up at him and wagged his tail. Short and scruffy, with a black patch over one eye, and a bad habit of wandering off in whatever direction smelled most interesting, there was no way they could expect anyone to believe Toby was a highly trained guide dog. Beth didn't bother to argue. She knew he was right. "What about the museum, then?" she said. "It's not open today," said Tom gloomily. They turned away and wandered aimlessly back across the road. Beth slowed down to gaze longingly through the steamed-up windows of a cafe. The door opened, and she took a deep breath, relishing the delicious aroma of fish and chips. "I think we should go home," she said. "It's raining. Mum wouldn't want us to stay out if it's raining. We could go upstairs out of the way and do some more unpacking." Tom thought for a minute, but then he shook his head. "I don't think so, Beth. It's really cold up there. The windows don't fit properly. And if Toby doesn't get his walk now, we'll probably just have to take him out later." "Just because you're 20 minutes older than me doesn't give you the right to order me about," grumbled Beth. But she perked up at the sight of a man stepping out of a small white van outside their new house. It looked as though the plumber had arrived. "There's always the Tourist Information Office," said Tom. "But we're not tourists." "Not anymore," said Beth. "We live here now." Beth always liked to get the facts straight, usually just before she bent them. Tom was losing patience. "It's better than nothing, isn't it?" "Okay," said Beth, thinking that maybe by the time they got back the heating would be on and their damp and chilly new house might be a bit more comfortable. "At least we'll be indoors." Damp and bedraggled, they made their way to the tourist office and squeezed inside. A voice on the radio was droning its way through a weather report that nobody needed to hear. It looked like everyone who hadn't made it into the Seabird Centre had come here instead. There was even another dog, a tiny thing with a jeweled collar and a tartan bow on top of its head. Its owner took one look at Toby and scooped the little dog up into her arms. Toby shook himself, sending splatters everywhere. The woman behind the desk tutted and went off to fetch a mop, while Tom and Beth headed for a display stand in the corner, out of the way of everyone else. "Look, Tom!" Beth pulled out a leaflet. "That's our new house." The picture on the leaflet showed a huddle of narrow, 3-story fishermen's houses painted in different colours, blue and green and salmon pink. At the far end of the street, sea and sky blended together in 2 different shades of blue. Tom studied the picture. "It looks pretty," said Beth. "It looks pretty on the outside." She reached out and laid her finger on the little window right at the top of their house. "That's supposed to be my room. Instead, I'm camping on your bedroom floor." "I haven't got a bed yet either," Tom pointed out. "No," agreed Beth, "but at least your room doesn't have a broken window and wallpaper hanging off the walls." She opened up the leaflet and stared down at a picture of the Seabird Centre. Behind it was North Berwick Harbour, nestling in the shelter of the headland. With a snort of disgust, she jammed the pamphlet back into the stand. The woman with the mop had finished wiping the floor and was back behind the counter, but she was still watching them. Uncomfortably conscious of her eyes boring into the back of his head, Tom crossed the room to the information board. Beth stood behind him, her breath hot on his neck as he scanned the adverts for holiday activities and places to stay. "What's that?" he said at last, pointing to a bright green card right in the middle of the board. "It's your river," Beth read aloud. "Help keep it safe. Join people opposing pollution. That's POP." She grinned at Tom and carried on reading. "Open meeting in the Jubilee Hall, Sunday 14th of June. "That's today," said Tom. "And look," he pointed to a small pink post-it stuck to the bottom of the notice. "It says Dogs Welcome. What do you think of that, Toby?" Toby didn't seem in the least bit interested. He had found a leaflet of his own and was busy tearing it to shreds. "Can I help you with anything?" They whirled round to see the mop lady standing right behind them. She bent down and snatched up Toby's well-chewed leaflet. Ignoring his whine of disappointment, she said, "Was there something in particular you were looking for?" "We found it, thanks," said Beth. "Come on, Tom. Let's go." She headed for the door, too busy concentrating on making a dignified exit to notice the sudden silence. As the door swung shut behind them, every head in the room turned towards the voice on the radio. So that's the end of chapter 1. And there's something about to happen that is going to change Tom and Beth's life forever.